We are live. Hello and welcome to PropTechBuzz, the world's only new age digital marketing platform that launches and promotes PropTech products on the global stage. There is no other platform like us that combines the power of media, products, leadership, and community together. Now, I have my guest already here, and it's impolite to keep him waiting, but I will take that liberty because I've sought his permission to take just 2 minutes because it's not enough to just tell, but to show. And I'm gonna share my screen and show what PropTechBuzz is all about before I introduce my esteemed guest today. So here is PropTechBuzz. As I said, we combine the power of media, products, leadership, and community. All right. And this is where we bring in, you can discover global prop tech. So we have close to 800 products today. And you will be, our search is going to get better in the coming week, not weeks, but coming week. We are going to improve our search where you will be able to search our leadership, all the members on our community, all the VIPs, all the discussions that are happening, you will be able to get to them from this global search here. But for now, the search is limited just with product. Say you search for want, and then you go to want, and then it just opens the product want. All right. And every product has an SEO enabled landing page. And I think we are one of the best platforms with great SEO. And our SEO strength is also being lend to the SEO of these product pages. So here is Want. Want is a CRM tool for commercial real estate here, and you get to see what the products are. Usually there is a product video. So Want did not have a product video here, but it tells you what problem it is solving in the world, how is it solving, what are the top features, and so on and so forth. And it also lists out all the people that are supporting it. And not just that, this is a dynamic platform which mimics a real world conference or a trade fair where you're actually meeting real people. So if you go to a product page, you will be able to see who the founders are, or who the head of sales is, or who the head of marketing is. And then you will be able to go to them and strike a conversation in case the product catches your fancy and you are interested to talk about that. Okay, in the next week we are also launching a direct messaging. You will be able to nudge them and have a strike a conversation there. So this is about search. Every day we pick exciting product innovations from across the world. Just this morning I came to know about a new age AI based property search. So we're going to launch them. So we pick exciting new products from across the globe, and around 7 to 8 of them gets launched every single day. And people come in and they vote there, and so on and so forth. Also, at any given point of time, there are people from across the globe who are members who are online. So it is actually a social media platform, B2B, and where people will be are online and they are checking out our platform. Here is Giri, is the founder of Realpha, which is a Nasdaq public company. Yog, he's the founder of Austrian PropTech Association, and lots of other people. How do you get to these people? So we have, as you can see, we have around 2,500 members on our platform, out of which we have a coveted list of leaders, which is around 171 of them as VIPs. These VIPs are the CEOs, the founders, investors, and some premium CXOs, all put into a private discussion room, which is non-accessible to the non-VIPs. And this is just to give them a safe space. And this is how you get into this discussion forum. This is a public forum, but you need to get into a VIP room to access the information and the conversation that happens with a lot of engagement. And yeah, we can create a safe space for these VIPs to converge and have conversations. We also are a media house. So we are a registered media company where we write, our editorial team and a bunch of researchers, they pick exciting new PropTech stories from across the globe. We are doing a story from a PropTech company all the way from Iraq, yes, Baghdad. We are doing a story from there. We got in touch with PropTech founders from Vietnam, from all parts of the world. Obviously, most of our traffic comes from the US, but we want to be a legit global company, and we do not want to leave away any part of the geography on the map. If you are on the map, if you are a PropTech founder, and if you have not yet launched your product on our platform, do it because it's free. Yes, we do some premium. That's how we do premium launches, where we put in our marketing powers behind you. But hey, if you want to go for free, you can go for free, and we do it. We still give you a lot of eyeballs on our platform. With that, I stop this, and I welcome my esteemed guest today. Oh, by the way, did I not share my screen at all, or did I?
No, you shared your screen. Yeah, it was there.
Okay, great, excellent. So with that, let's welcome David. David, welcome to PropTechBuzz. How are you doing today, David?
Yeah, very good, Ravi. Thanks for having me. Thank you again for inviting me to your podcast. Excited to be here.
David is the former global CMO at Equim, which Equim is a celebrated startup because it grew from a small company to achieve eight figures annual recurring revenue. And David has been instrumental in that journey, because he took that journey. He was one of the early founding members, and he took that journey to make it successful. And that's why anybody who is part of the journey and see that scale and be part of that is it becomes very valuable, right? And he has a lot of stories, lots of experience drawn from this massive experience of building this company. And that's why I thought you'd make for a great guest to talk about what does it take for a PropTech company to achieve that 8 million figures, right? And that's why we are here. So I gave a very short introduction of you, David, but to set the context before we get into the meatier stuff of growth, I want you to share a little bit about your background, of your career trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thanks, Ravi, for inviting me to this podcast. Great platform. It's been really useful to me to connect with other peers, discover other companies, and you guys are publishing great content. So again, thank you for the great platform you started. But yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is David Chiapoco. I am the former global CMO at Equium. But yeah, just to touch on what Equium is a 12-year-old PropTech company that was a startup, is now a category leader. And Equium specializes in a category called workplace experience software. And it's actually a niche that Equium started 12 years ago. So they created that category and led it since. But a workplace experience is a suite of software that's catering to office landlords specifically to help them manage the end-to-end operations of their buildings. So Equium in particular focuses on the tenant, so the people like you and me who work in offices, or at least used to, and now it's like 2 or 3 times a week, sorry. But it's everything that the tenant touches. So things like getting into the building, welcoming visitors, booking spaces, maintenance requests, events, news, amenities, etc. Equium digitizes all of those functions because they used to be really offline and difficult to do. And then the other thing that Equium does really well is it provides data to office landlords so that they understand their tenants better. So most landlords without a platform like Equium would have to run surveys or talk to their customers manually, which takes a lot of time to understand what they want to see from the building more in order to retain them. But Equium automates all that, provides them a lot of analytics so that they can refine their strategy. But like you said, Equium started off very much like all the startups on the platform that you have. It was born in Melbourne, Australia. So shout out to all Australian startups out there. But now it is across 25 countries. In terms of scale, to give you an idea, it's about 150 million square feet, which is our portfolio. That's 800 office buildings globally, with about 300,000 users. But yeah, that's a bit about Equium. But about me, if you want a little bit about myself, I actually joined Equium as, like you said, from the very beginning. I was the second employee. So that was 12 years ago. I was very green. In fact, yeah, that was 2011, 2010. I just graduated from university, actually from Melbourne University. I actually have a neuroscience degree. So I was one step away from becoming a PhD in neuroscience. In the final year of your neuroscience degree, you get to work with real scientists on a real scientific project. And I loved it, but I realized that I couldn't be a real scientist full-time the rest of my life. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't my passion. But obviously, I spent like 4 years on this degree. And so I didn't want to waste it. So I looked for a way to kind of use it still. And thankfully, I found this master's program on the business side of science, so commercializing technology. And it was at Monash University. So shout out to Monash University as well. It's an amazing uni. But it was essentially an accelerated MBA. It was it was 7 days of classes for 10 months straight, no breaks. They condensed 2 years into 1 year essentially. But the key thing about it was you get to work with CSIRO. Have you heard of CSIRO before?
CSI, I don't know.
So CSIRO is a innovation lab in Australia that's famous for inventing Wi-Fi, for example, and they invent all these cool technologies. But one of their problems is they don't know how to commercialize it because they're essentially full of scientists. So they partnered with this university, and the university gave them students like myself to help them build business plans for their tech. So I joined this class. It was amazing. I met a bunch of really smart kids. The other thing I got from it was, up to this point in my life, I didn't know you could start your own company. I didn't know that was a viable pathway. And I met a bunch of kids in my class. One of them in particular started a clone of Groupon, if you remember that deal site from like 15 years ago, Web 2.0. And I was like, oh, wow, you can start your own company. That's amazing. So I did my master's, and part of the master's, you win $20,000 from NAB, which is one of the top 4 banks in Australia, if you write and produce the best business plan. And, luckily I won that prize at the end of the year, finished top of my class. And I was able to take that money, and I was like, why not just start my own company? And so I started my own company. But obviously I didn't know what I was doing. We were selling social media marketing in 2010, and no one would pay us to manage their Facebook and Instagram accounts. Like, no one would believe us that it was the next big thing. And so also, I think we didn't know how to really sell. We were pretty clueless. So 14 months later, that company folded. And then I was pretty lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. All my friends had started their careers in banking and finance, and they're doing really well. And I'm like back to square one. So I was pretty lost. But thankfully, I just applied to a relatively random job on Seek for Equium. Didn't really know exactly what they're doing, but I nailed the interview. I, got the job, and the rest is history. And I still can't believe what we've been able to do since. But for those who don't know Equium, we succeeded essentially in creating a new category of tenant experience, what it's called now. But like going back to the lessons of this call, we found product market fit. We scaled really, really quickly. We went international. I became head of design for the company and product strategy and CMO. But yeah, I learned most of my professional skills from that 12 years at Equium, scaling a marketing team, building a marketing program from scratch, expanding globally, generating pipeline, building a brand, et cetera. I learned all from Equium. So that's where I'm going to be pulling all my lessons today. Yeah, I'm really excited to share, because, there's a lot of trials and successes from 12 years. I think there's some real key core challenges that startups face, that I faced. And I just want to give back to the community, because I want to see more prop tech successes out there like Equium, and founders succeed and achieve their vision.
I can't wait to get into the meatier stuff here, David,
Yeah.
because as I said, you have built this the hard way. You have learned it from the grooves, as they say. So your lessons are really, really going to be of value for all the startups who are on their way to reach where Equium reached today, right? So let's get into that. So in PropTechBuzz community, we have a lot of founders. We have, of all kinds, right? So we have founders who are just starting up. We have founders who have reached their million ARR, to the founders who have actually gone public. So our community have all kinds of founders, but most of them are many of them still struggle when it comes to marketing, right? So my question to you is, of all the challenges that you see, what are those prominent, significant challenges PropTech founders find when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a ton. There's a lot out there. But in my 12 years of experience, and then post Equium, just speaking to founders that I'm helping with advice, there's 3 recurring challenges that I'm finding over and over again. And looking back in my history, they were the key kind of roadblocks that you had to kind of overcome. And I looked at a recent study actually for B2B SaaS companies by ChartMogul, and it basically stated that less than 13% of B2B SaaS companies make it to 10 million ARR even after 10 years in business. So there's a lot of companies that are stuck between 0 and 10. Yeah. And it's a real challenge to get to 10 and then beyond. But looking at my own experience, I think there's three main challenges that I want to talk about here specifically. First one is finding product market fit or your ideal customer profile. This really manifests itself within that 0 and 10 stage where you're like, okay, who do we actually want to focus on? And who's our main segment? You might be catering to 4 to 5 different customer types, and your resources are getting strained. And ultimately, you need to focus, and everyone's telling you to niche down. But how do you actually do that? Because for at least my experience, once you niche down, that one segment is going to be able to fuel your growth to the next phase if you find your ideal customer. So that's number one. Number two is one of the most common challenges that I ask for advice for is differentiation. And we struggled with this also. One of the rewards of doing well as a startup is you'll get competition, and they'll copy everything you do and say they do everything that you do. So how do you stand out and maintain your leadership? That's number two. And then number three is lead generation, which is everyone's favorite question. Like, how do you generate leads? But to me, that's a bigger question about that. It's about building demand. How do you generate leads? How do you close sales? How do you grow revenue? But the two key things to me is how do you build a lead generation funnel that is sustainable, which means it's building leads and pipeline continuously, and it's not spiky and sporadic. And then how do you keep building that pipeline year on year so it keeps improving year on year? So those are the three main things I want to talk about today.
Awesome. This is nothing can be more valuable than this. How do you create a funnel that is not sporadic, but actually consistent? And I mean, this is our marketeers, growth marketeers, the highest paid because they are the ones who are generating business, right? Is it right to say are they one of the highest paid in the industry?
I think so. I think it's a highly popular position right now because founders are, okay, we need leads to get a growth marketer. But I would actually caution them from that because growth marketing sometimes can be tactical and not strategic. And if you go straight into tactics, they're shorter term generally, and they're not going to be long lasting effects. What you need is, I would actually really recommend founders, if they can afford it, to hire a head of marketing and a head of sales as early as they can, but not a junior growth marketer. I think I would hire the strategic mind first, because if you get your strategy right, then the execution becomes 10 times easier. And if you do it the opposite, it actually becomes more challenging.
Got it. See, I have a set of questions that I planned with you, but you know what? When I get curious, I go to different tangents. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So you said head of marketing, head of sales, and then we also hear in the last couple of years, chief revenue officer titles becoming very popular, right? Which is they lead sales, marketing, and product as a triad, and they lead that. Could you shed some light on that role? What's happening there, and especially if you're looking for founders who are setting up their sales and marketing functions, how should they look about setting the leadership there, and what is it about the chief revenue officer role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, just going back to my earlier point, what I would advise founders to do is to hire 4 key roles immediately or as soon as they can. Typically what happens is founders hire these roles sequentially, like once per year, because that's all they can afford. But if you can't raise enough money to do this, I would hire a head of sales, a head of marketing, head of customer success, and head of product within the same year, rather than across 5 years, because those are the key 4 functions, in my opinion, that deliver your go-to-market. Those 4 departments, if they work together, will be the ones generating your revenue and growing your revenue. So that's tip number 1. And then tip number 2, in terms of the CRO, I actually really believe in this role. I've left Equium now, but they've since restructured to have a CRO, for example. The reason why I love this is tied to my first point, which is I really do believe an effective go-to-market engine or strategy involves all four teams working together under one strategy. And you don't want to work in silos. I've done it before. It makes it super hard. You are essentially like a football team, which each player having a different strategy or tactic. It just doesn't work. So to have a CRO that oversees all four teams makes total sense to me, and driving the strategy, setting the strategy, and keeping it consistent. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that role, and I think it would make a lot of impact to any company that deploys it.
Got it. Thanks for mentioning customer success. I forgot about it. I made it a triad, but it's actually customer success also.
It's often overlooked.
Yeah.
Often overlooked. Yeah.
So, and usually a good CRO can come from any of these functions. Am I right? Or usually they are marketing. Their expertise is marketing.
I think you generally want someone that is revenue minded, that has proven to produce and generate revenue for the company before, but that could come from sales, that could come from marketing, customer success, even product. So, but I think the key thing is someone that is fairly generalist in terms of versatility of understanding and appreciates all four functions, and is not just single-minded, not just a sales leader. You want a sales leader that thinks about marketing and product, customer success as well. So because this person will be leading the entire revenue growth engine.
Got it. Before I move on, just last bit on the split of roles between the sales and the marketing. So primarily, where does the marketing responsibility end, and where does the sales function takes it over from the marketing? Because is it just getting the leads and passing on the leads to the sales function, or there is a lot of overlap? Could you just explain the overlapping and cross-functional relationship between these two functions?
Yeah, I think
is a good relationship between a sales and marketing team?
I think a great relationship is working firstly under the same strategy, like I mentioned, believing in there's no marketing strategy or no sales strategy. It is one go-to-market strategy, and that includes product and customer success. And I'm happy to go through how actually that works later on this podcast. But yeah, you want to remove silo thinking, and you want to agree on a lot of things. Like you have to have strategic alignment in a lot of things. So for example, firstly, you need to align on who are you targeting? What are your target accounts? What's tier one? Who are we going for this year specifically, for example? What is your unique selling proposition? How do you message that to the market? How are we getting leads? Like who's doing what? Marketing's going to be doing this. Sales going to be doing that. It really doesn't matter where leads are coming from ultimately. Both functions will be working on it. But you need to agree on the core constituents of your strategy and then deploy it together. But in terms of the coordination between the teams, I think largely, if you really want to simplify it, marketing's job is to get the story of the company out there in the market and get your target customers to understand, firstly, discover you and understand you exist, and then understand what you're about. And then marketing's job is to convince and build that intent to buy, so that when they go to sales jobs is a lot easier to close the deal and get them to convert. But marketing's job, if you want to simplify it, is really just getting the name out there, articulating the value, articulating the need, making the market really believe in the problem. And then sales's job is to basically convert that demand into revenue. And then you have customer success down the track to grow that revenue. But yeah, that's how if you had to simplify it, that's how I would think about it.
Got it. One of the challenges for startups often is the messaging keeps changing because your role keeps evolving. You're you're evolving based on your journey towards product market fit. It is always a state of flux, right? Because I've seen so many startups who began with a certain messaging, But if you talk to them after 6 months or 9 months, their messaging is completely different. I'm sure Equan,
Yeah,
its journey has had its share of such flux or such evolution. How does a
absolutely.
marketing how does a marketing team navigate through such dynamics, which is how the nature of business is?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, like we can segue to this first kind of challenge, finding product market fit. I think the key question that founders and CEOs need to ask themselves during this kind of phase is, not just who is your target customer, but what market segment do you have an unfair advantage serving? And because if you find that particular segment, you can grow to 10, 15, 20 million ARR just focusing on that one segment. It'll really accelerate your growth. That's what happened at Equium. And if you don't find it, you'll stay in this state of flux where you're kind of catering to 4 to 5 different segments. And eventually you'll strain your resources. You won't be able to deliver value fast enough to these multiple segments. Customers will churn and your growth will plateau because it'll be like one road that splits to multiple roads, and initially they start pretty close together, but then they start separating and it becomes harder and harder. But what I would say also is a common misconception is that you need to like niche down ASAP and find that segment ASAP. I would say that that's not correct. Yeah, it's actually completely fine to be in that phase that you just described, which is you're experimenting, you're finding different segments, you're trialing different audiences. In fact, it's better to start wide and then narrow down. This can be from 0 to even 5 million ARR. You're catering to 4 different segments. You're testing and iterating your messaging. That's completely okay. But longer term, you do have to focus. What I would advise founders to do during this phase is just keep talking to customers, getting feedback, solve their problems the best you can, test your messaging. But eventually, I think it's the CEO's job ultimately and the executive team's job to make this decision. But ultimately, the market will pull you one direction. There will be one customer segment that is growing the fastest, that has the happiest customers, that has the lowest churn. And that'll be likely your ICP. And you do have to make a call as a CEO to say, okay, we're going to focus on this one segment going forward. Assuming there's enough TAM, of course, in this market segment, that could take you to the next phase. But like at Equium, for example, we focus on office now. But back in the day, year 1 to 4, we were doing office, we were doing residential, we had retail customers like shopping centers, we had co-working spaces, and we were doing our best to deliver value to all 4 of these companies. But then there were signals that pushed us to office. For example, our co-founder is an office landlord who owns one of the biggest office buildings in Melbourne. So that's a unique unfair advantage for us to have him. Our network was all office landlords. We had connections with all top 10 landlords in Australia in the office segment. Our physical office was within an A-grade office building, which is our target market. So we were in the building that we were delivering value to. We saw highest demand from office. Our customers were happiest from the office segment, and there was less competition back down in the office. So all of these factors pushed us to focus on one segment, which was office and A-grade. And Equium has stayed there for over a decade. We haven't really moved from that segment for 11 to 12 years, and only recently has Equium gone down market. So I'm just saying all of this because if you find that one segment, it could fuel the rest of your growth for the bulk of your company's life, really.
Got it. I'm enjoying this conversation so much that I'm deviating from the script because it just piques my curiosity. I'm definitely I'm taken by your experience. I promise this is the last deviation.
Yeah.
Usually what happens is it's very important that the investors understand experimentation is part to finding your direction, right? Many a times investors do not understand your experimentation, trying different segments and trying to find your way out. wherein they see this as distraction, they see this as the founders or the management team not able to decide where they want to focus on. How do you navigate investors' expectations when you are on the path to finding your product market fit?
I think there's a few key things you need to focus on for investors. I think you need to have a really strong vision. And this is a 10, 20-year vision of where you want to really take the company. And that vision should reassure your investors that this short-term thinking, the short-term period where we're experimenting and figuring out our ICP is part of the long-term plan to get to that vision. And if your investors are clued in on the fundamentals of like startup growth patterns, which they will be if you pick the right investors, then they know that there is a period like this where you're essentially testing and trying to find product market fit. Now, I think when they'll have problems is if you take if you're taking too long to find a product market fit, and you're essentially doing what I just mentioned earlier, which is you're starting to stretch your resources and you're not niching down when you need to, because that's when it starts to impact your revenue, and ultimately that's what investors really want to see is growth. And so I think as long as you've got a time cap to this period, you have a goal of, okay, in 6 to 9 months, we're going to focus on one segment. We're going to spend the next 6 to 9 months, Mr. Investor, Mrs. Investor, to just figure out our ICP. But at the end of that, we're going to make a call, and we're going to put all of our chips into that one segment. But you're going to have to trust us right now to find that.
What would be an ideal time frame for finding your product market fit for a startup?
I don't think there's an ideal time frame, but I think the sooner the better. I would generally say the sooner the better, because the sooner you find that segment, the sooner you can put all your entire product roadmap behind it, and the sooner you can start really pulling yourself away from the competition, because your goal is to basically be 10 to 20 times better than the competition for that one specific niche, and that's their entire goal as a company.
Correct. Excellent. Thank you. That was so valuable. Let's now talk about your statistic where you said that only less than 13% are able to cross the 10 million ARR. Did you say that?
Yeah. In 10 years.
What is it? What is it that that is so much of mortality beyond 10 million ARR? What is it that is the crux of the problem why startups cannot go beyond 10 million?
I think the first one we already discussed, which is find an ideal customer profile. I think that's one of the first things you need to do and get done as a company is niche down. So go through your experimentation, figure that out, and then niche down. I think the first one, once you crack that really gets you to the next phase.
So that means one of the problem is the startups have not been able to figure out what is their ICP that they should double down upon. Is that how it is?
Yeah, I speak to a lot of early stage founders, and one of the most common things they tell me or say to me is, we don't really know how we stand out, and we don't know who to focus on, and they're inherently tied together, and they're selling and marketing to a really broad range of customers, but really the way to differentiate is to market to a very specific niche. And I think that's the key step that startups need to figure out.
Excellent. Okay, so that is challenge number one. What are the challenges?
Yeah, I think the next one is differentiation. I think that's one of the most commonly asked problems that I'm asked for advice on is, hey, Dave, we've got we're at 7 million ARR, but we've got like 6 competitors, and they all say they do the same thing. They look the same thing. Our competitors, our customers think that they do the same thing. How do we stand out? I think that's number 2. And then the number 3 is the generating leads and generating pipeline sustainably. I think you crack those 2, you got a pretty good shot at making the 10. But yeah, going back to differentiation, if you want to go into that now, like Equium, we went through this our entire life. We created a category, and within year 3 or 4, I still remember, there was like maybe 4 or 5 competitors just popped out of nowhere, it felt like. and most of them copied our messaging word by word, our slogans off our website, pretty much word by word. And most of them even copied our products UI and UX, which is funny because they even copied the same mistakes that we made, the stuff that we didn't like. So it was quite funny. And then year 5, 6, there was maybe 20, 30 competitors, and it just kept going from there, and I stopped counting.
Wow.
So it's a good sign to have competition. It's a positive signal, and you should appreciate it, and pushes you to innovate. All of that, everyone understands. I think the danger with competition is, and as a founder, is if you're not proactive with adjusting your strategy, because you need to, your differentiation, how you stand out, will start to erode and dilute. Customers will start having a really hard time distinguishing you from the others, even though you're the first starter in the category, like we were. On paper, it looked like we delivered the same functionality as the next guy, and so.
So there is no advantage of being an early adopter, early mover, into an industry if you are not at the cutting edge and of your strategy and continue to differentiate even if there are copycats around. So there's no advantage.
Absolutely.
Just because you are a first mover does not mean you will win.
You have an advantage for about 3 years, and then it becomes a battlefield. Yeah, and you have to keep maintaining your strategy. Exactly right. One of the dangers for differentiation, I think, is so how do you actually differentiate? Well, what I've learned is that you can't differentiate with just words alone. A lot of founders think, okay, I'm just going to hire a branding agency, pay them a bunch of money, and then they're going to help us update our positioning and messaging, and we're going to update the website, and then all of a sudden we're going to be differentiated. It just doesn't work like that. Words are not defensible at all. They're too easily copied. Messaging is too easily cloned and also countered very easily. So what I've learned from our lessons over 12 years of maintaining our leadership in our category is that you actually have to differentiate. The only way to differentiate is to differentiate your entire business strategy. In particular, your go-to-market strategy, which is how you generate demand, how you win customers, and how you grow revenue. So your product, sales, marketing, customer success teams, all 4 of those need to be aligned to your strategy to really double down on your unique selling proposition. So I'll give you an example of how we did this at Equim, if you'd like to hear.
Yeah, please, because otherwise, without example, this would not make sense. Because how do you differentiate on strategy? For every company, the strategy is the same. Sales has a strategy, marketing has a strategy, customer success, lead generation has a strategy. But how do you create a unique strategy? So I would love to know your example.
Yeah, I think it's easy to build a strategy. Then it's about executing it and living it, and that's what I want to talk about. So taking one step back, what I would advise founders to do as like an action item, if this is a problem for you right now, is to how do you need to find your unique selling proposition, first of all, your USP. There's 4 things you need to do for that, or 3 things. Firstly is to look at your own data in your platform and your product, figure out what is the most liked feature, the most valuable feature in your CRM as well. And then another thing I did that was usually valuable was I did basically a massive competitive analysis of our competition, like a 6-month project, top 20. I learned how they sold, their positioning, their messaging, their pricing, etc. And then I did a ton of customer interviews with our current customers. And the key thing there is to ask really hard questions. You don't want to ask things like, why did you pick us? Why do you like Equim? You need to ask things like, what don't you like about our product? What do you like about our competition's product? If we disappeared today, what would you replace us with? And it can't be a survey. You need to be able to talk to them virtually, at least on a call, and look for emotion and energy, because you need to be diving deeper. But anyway, long story short, that's what I did at Equim. And at the end of that, you'll get 2 or 3 trends that can become your USP. And so for us, for example, one of the things that came out of our research was that our customers loved us for our data and insights, our ability to give them analytics and knowledge about their customers, which is the workers in buildings. And so we doubled down on that strategy. And so, for example, because we wanted to focus on and on that USP of data and insights. Marketing, my department, we created a annual study where we studied our 300,000 users of our platform and provided insight to office landlords on how they want to use the office post-COVID, hybrid work, what they want to see in the building, et cetera. These are data and insights you can't get elsewhere. That's very useful for our target customers, office landlords, to improve their buildings. So that's what marketing did. And then sales took all the data from that report and integrated it into their pitch. So we created a challenger script that was fully based on data and showed and taught our audience new ways of thinking using that information. And then customer success built tailored account-based versions of that report. So the likes of like a Lend-Lease, for example, would get their own report specific to their account. And then product, and you'll see if you go to getequium.com right now on the website, the product team created a complete, a dedicated stream just on data, doubling down on that analytics. And it's one of the core solutions now of Equium is like the dashboards and analytics that we provide to tenants. And we just doubled down and invested on that. But that's just an example of, you do your research, you find your USP. Yes, you update your website and your messaging, but then the entire go-to-market team realigns underneath this and essentially doubles down on that to really make it even more of a strength.
Got it. Thank you. That was very comprehensive. How do you? So we talk about ICPs. Is there a silver bullet to finding your ICP? What is the best way to identify your ICP?
Yeah, I think I don't think there's a silver bullet, but there are signals. Like I mentioned previously, I think that'll be a segment in your customers that'll grow the fastest, and they'll be the happiest in terms of if you have an NPS or a customer survey every year, and they'll have the lowest churn. And that was definitely what happened for us at Equium. We had customers that in co-working, for example, that just didn't have the features they needed for co-working that we couldn't deliver. But then in the office segment, there was if you could draw a Venn diagram, what we could deliver matched a lot of what they needed. And so I think signals like that is really what you need to look for. But I think it's going to be a mixture of science and gut feeling, really, as a founder to figure out your ICP.
Got it. Let's now talk about one of the non-scientific topics, but very important topic of brand building, right? So you cannot analytically build brand, but a lot of things come together. As I say, it takes a village to build a brand, right? How do you build a brand that keeps you at number one in your competition?
I love this question. I actually wrote a little bit about it the other day on LinkedIn. I like to simplify it for founders because brand is this nebulous thing. How do I even do it? Like, what does it even mean? I think to me, ultimately, a brand is to have an opinion. You need to have an opinion, a point of view that is differentiated from the rest. It might be counterintuitive, but ultimately there was a reason for your opinion, and the reason is you think things can be done better in some way. For founders, I would look back into your why and why you started this company. There's a reason why you started it, and no matter when you started it, it was a unique and compelling vision, and that's why people bought into your story and bought your product. I think I would double down on that, and in terms of building your brand, it's about just sharing that story out to the market consistently with a personality and an opinion. So you want to share the reason why you started your company. You want to share the successes of your customers. You want to share your journey as a company as you build new features, as you launch new things. I think sharing those three threads with a certain personality that is consistent, that it resonates with your customers, that is the foundation of your brand. So I wouldn't complicate it more than that. I think if you're starting out, if you're just starting out and if you don't have a brand, the first thing I would focus on is just the content marketing, just sharing your story out on LinkedIn or wherever your audience spends their attention. It could be Twitter or X, it could be Instagram. For PropTech, it's mostly LinkedIn. And so I would just start sharing those 3 threads. Again, your story, your like what change are you championing? Why does it matter? How are you guys different? Why should people trust you over others? And then your customer stories, and then also your journey as a company. Those are the 3 stories, threads that people really resonate with. It's not really about, this is product feature X we just invented, check it out how cool it is, or we've got this new customer, look how cool we are, like this logo is amazing. It's about proof of value. It's about humanizing yourself as a brand and telling your story, including the challenges and failures you've had. Actually, I really respect brands that talk about the challenges, not always the wins. And I think one of the easiest ways to do this, and I've seen this actually quite often, the founders of a company are shy to storytell, and I would challenge them to take that mantle more. There's a reason why you've dedicated your life right now to this company. Talk about it. Like, you do a great job, Ravi, with PropTechBuzz and the upcoming Climate Tech Buzz. So, and you talk about your company all the time and evangelize it. That's what founders really need to do, because ultimately people don't react to a company as a brand. They really react to people that represent that company.
Could you double down on the unique point of view and the storytelling? You don't have to elaborate on that, but
Yeah.
how can one build that skill of a unique point of view or storytelling? What do founders need to do to become better at?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things you can do. From a tactical standpoint, I would look into firstly, I would ask yourself again, like, why did I start this company? What is the challenge? What is the challenge we're facing? And then I would look into the top 5 challenges that your customers are facing. So it could be visitor management for Equian, for example, access control. It could be lack of understanding of their tenants' wants and needs, systems being disconnected, etc. And then I would formulate my opinion on how to fix those problems. Those will likely be fairly logical and straightforward, which means they're not interesting. What you then need to do is flip those opinions around to create something that is compelling and contrarian, and that's going to make you more interesting and to listen to. No one's going to, if you post on LinkedIn and say, lead generation is very important, like, no one's going to care. But if you say something like lead generation is dead, social media is the next is the new way of generating leads, something like that, contrarian thinking, that's more interesting, and that'll make you stand out.
I always envy people or founders who can churn out high value content just like that. Okay. I'm sure what comes out is a result of what goes in, right? So
Totally.
it's also what your internal consumption pattern is, what kind of knowledge you are consuming every day, what kind of conversations you are having every day, what kind of people that you're talking to, how diverse is your internal team, and what are those unique insights because of these exercises come out, isn't it? It never comes out of void or just like that. It's a result of a lot of hard work. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to be pulling from your own experience. I would say if you're a founder in a startup, you already have so many stories that you can talk about. It's just a matter of like pulling that out of yourself and then making it more interesting for the general population.
Excellent. Thank you. This was very, very valuable. Now let's come to generating enough pipeline. This is, I think, the most important. I'm struggling now because whenever I'm having the conversation, I always have this most valuable bit that I would like to promote on LinkedIn as one clipping, and then I would tie it to the long form full interview. But now you're competing because you're throwing so many knowledge bombs. I do not know which segment to pick, but that's a good problem to have.
We'll have to share multiple then.
Yeah, I'll share multiple. Let's talk about pipeline. How does one get not sporadic pipeline, but a sustainable pipeline to hit your revenue targets year after year?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's exactly right. Those are your goals. Your goal is to have a consistent pipeline, not sporadic, not spiky. The other thing you have to do is to do that efficiently, is you're not burning money. You're not actually burning more than you're putting into the system. But yeah, whenever someone asks me, we need more leads. How do we get more leads? It's a multifaceted problem. Just for context, for Equium, I dealt with this for 12 years. Marketing's main purpose is to generate pipeline at Equium. So I think over the first 5 years, I 10x'd our pipeline gen and maintained that year on year, improving our pipeline generation. And I managed to do that efficiently. I think I averaged about 4-to-1 pipeline to spend ratios. For every dollar we spend on marketing, we generate $4 in pipeline. So that's highly efficient.
Could you repeat that and help us understand that proportion there? Why is it that important?
Yeah, it's basically how much do you spend in marketing, including staff and resources, and then how much qualified pipeline is marketing generating, and you look at that ratio. And generally, you want to be 2-to-1 in terms of pipeline generation versus spend, or higher. So I average about 4-to-1, and the reason for that I'll share with you now. But there's just a few core principles that allowed me to do that I really want to share to others, because I think a lot of founders jump into this too quickly, tactically, without really building the strategy. But so how would I approach pipeline generation to achieve those goals? The main things I would say is I would tell founders and CEOs to take one step back and simplify this thing. It's really, to me, marketing is like, you can simplify marketing into 3 steps, which is you have your story, your brand point of view, your USP that we mentioned. You figure that out. You tell that story consistently. And then you have your ideal customer profile, the people you want to target, people you're serving, the segment, your ICP, et cetera. And marketing's job really is to take your story in front of as many of those target customers as possible in the most effective and efficient way possible. That's really it. So you have your story, your ICP. Marketing's job is to share that out as much as possible. So the question is, how do you share that out in the most efficient way? So for Equium, what I did, and that allowed me to achieve those results, was I followed 5 main principles. The first one is to deploy tactics the easiest and fastest first. So typically for B2B PropTech or SaaS, it'll be customer referrals, organic content, events, paid ads. Those are your first couple of strategies and tactics. And then you want to do SEO, PR, outbound, ABM partnerships later, typically, because that takes more time to scale up. It's longer term strategies. It's more difficult for most teams. You'll get immediate returns from the former set. So that's what I did at Equium. I literally rolled this out almost in that order. But obviously, there's different companies, different tactics. But you just have to figure out, what is your team or yourself most specifically geared for. So are you an SEO expert? Then maybe you should start at SEO then. Or is your team really good at content or paid content? Then maybe you should do paid content earlier. But you really have to cater to what your team is really strong. It has a unique unfair advantage in. So that's number 1, is just scaling logically. Number 2 is and I followed this almost just not by luck, but like it just became like this for at Equium. But basically, I focused on one channel at a time, and I really recommend that. So a rule of thumb is to just focus 80% of the resource in one tactic, and then 20% on experiments. So that's what I did at Equium. I essentially built one channel per year. I looked at my resume that I updated for LinkedIn recently, and it was basically every year I launched something new, and that's essentially how I kept growing the pipeline. But
so every year you added a new channel.
Yes, yeah. So for literally,
after you have maximized the channel, you add a new channel.
Yeah, like not even maximized, but got it going recurringly, sustainably, predictably, and then essentially, okay, that's going well. Let's build another one. But yeah, for almost like a year, like for example, year 2, I think we did events, and we did the events for the whole year. And then the first year, all we did was LinkedIn. And then the year after that, we added, paid for entire year. So, we kept focusing on one channel at a time. And it's really hard to do this because there's so many shiny objects as a marketer. Marketing tools are really cheap, and you want to try different things, but I would really advise to just focus on one thing and get really, really good at that before moving on. Which takes me to my third point or principle, which is when you're testing new channels, you need to test really cheaply, which makes sense. But I think one of the key things is you don't want to scale that channel until you've proved your ROI. And the rule of thumb for me is, back to that ratio, until you've generated 2 to 3 times the pipeline that you put into the cost of the channel, until it's returning that much, you shouldn't scale it. So that happened to us at Equium, for example. I was testing cold outbound. And we were testing it really cheaply. We learned a lot. We failed multiple times on it, actually. For example, in Australia, LinkedIn outreach worked really well, but phones did not, and emails did not. Then in the UK, for whatever reason, emails worked really well, but then phone and LinkedIn bombed. And in the US, only phone worked. And so we tested that really cheaply over like 3 to 6 months. And then once we figured out what worked, then we put in, a lot more budget into it, and it worked really, really well. So that's what I would advise. And then the last 2 is to, I think, understand the difference between brand demand and lead gen. So you can't just focus on lead generation, and I'll tell you the definitions between the 3. But basically, brand awareness is getting your ideal customer to know you exist and what you're about. Generating demand is convincing that same audience to believe in your point of view and actually care and want to buy your product. So that's 2 separate steps. And the third one is to capture that interest. That's lead generation. You're getting someone's contact details in some way to capture their interest to buy. A lot of people just focus on lead generation. But if you don't focus on brand awareness and generating demand, then ultimately your pipeline will start to empty. Because when you get your message out there, as you know, 99% of people will not be ready to buy your product. It's going to take them 3, for us at Equium, sometimes 2 years to eventually become a customer. So you constantly need to build awareness. And for us in PropTech, in Office, it was things like PR. It was a lot of events like this one, in person as well, thought leadership. It was getting our story out there. And then we would have lead generating tactics to capture demand, like the report I mentioned, where you input your email, et cetera. But yeah, the last principle is pretty commonly understood, which is, to be data driven. But the main thing I would say here is I would advise founders to not forget the growth engine loop, which I call it, which is basically you have a strategy, what we talked about earlier. You have to execute that strategy, but then you also have to look at your results always to improve your strategy. And I think I've seen a lot of companies build a strategy well, start executing, but kind of neglect the data analysis. They might have things like they don't have a CRM that's really set up. And we had this in the first 3-4 years at Equium. We didn't really have a CRM that was set up. And I took it upon myself to set up the CRM so that we understood our data, our customers, and we had dashboards on our revenue. So I think that's the key thing, because you really want to keep looking at your data and improving your results. One last story for me on this. Account-based marketing is a hot topic, as you know, in the world of marketing, but I didn't really start it until I needed it at Equium. I looked at our data, and I saw that we were actually producing amazing levels of pipeline, but we were still projected to miss our target that year. And I looked at it because of our conversion rate. Our conversion rate was really low. And so, investigating that, we found out that our pitching and our demos weren't memorable. And, our prospects were coming away thinking, not really thinking about echoing post demo, and we looked exactly the same as the rest of the competition. So to solve that, we started account-based marketing, where we tailored our pitches to each account.
For the listeners who are not familiar with ABMs, what does account-based marketing mean?
Account-based marketing really is a change in it's an approach where instead of marketing to many, one message to thousands of people, you're marketing to very few, even to just one account. So you're tailoring your marketing and your efforts to a let's say 100 key customers, and each key customer has their own marketing strategy effectively. It takes a lot of resources.
Only for enterprise customers, because otherwise it's very hard to customize it. Just a small customers would not make the cut, right? So this has
yes, absolutely. So yeah, again, this is another lesson, which is you shouldn't start tactics unless it's actually needed. We only started account-based marketing year 8 of like the 12. The reason why we needed it was because competition was a lot stiffer. Winning deals was a lot harder, and we were going for way bigger enterprise level accounts. These are like billion-dollar companies with really long sales cycles, a lot of education, a lot of convincing, and to really stand out, ABM made a lot of sense. But if it doesn't make sense for your company because it's, like you mentioned, different customer segments too early, then yeah, you don't actually need to do this as well. But yeah, going back to the last principle, the only reason we started ABM was because I was able to track the data. And so, I think I would urge founders to not do this later. I would invest in a CRM or some kind of dashboard that tracks your revenue immediately, and then align your teams on that and have consistent internal calls reviewing your progress.
Excellent. Well, before I know I crossed that time here, I wanted to have a 45 minutes conversation, but when I get a really high value guest, I just go overboard.
No problem at all. I enjoyed it. We covered a lot of good stuff.
Any last minute, anything that you still have left to share? Any topics that you want to add? Any closing thoughts? Any closing remarks?
No, I think I would just say that, again, thank you for starting PropTechBuzz and inviting me as a VIP. Really appreciate it. I would urge everyone, if you have questions on anything that I mentioned today, to just contact me on PropTechBuzz or on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions. But yeah, really looking to help as many more other prop tech companies succeed in this space, or any founders in startups at all. So yeah, happy to help, and reach out to me if you have any questions.
Excellent. So David is an active member on PropTechBuzz. He hangs out, and he is very helpful. He goes out of his way to answer questions from other founders on our platform. And David, we would love to have you continue that relationship. In fact, we will be introducing in the next 8 to 9 days, we will be launching our direct messaging. So please come over to our platform, and then you will be able to have these conversations with likes of David and others on our platform. David, I cannot appreciate enough for your time to share with us and share with the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that you have acquired over the course of the years. So thanks again, and I hope to have you again in your new avatar in a few quarters or a few months. We'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Happy to do it again. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, David. See you around. Bye-bye.